In episode 132, we dipped our toes into Heinrich Schenker's approach to music analysis. Now, we will continue our discussion on horizontalization and prolong our discussion on prolongation. This is Music Student 101. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Okay, we are back.
We are back.
Again,
with more music theory for you.
Tell me about it. This is like a masterclass.
Oh yeah. This is some high level stuff at this point.
We'll just go ahead and say, if our announcer didn't already say it, definitely review the episode we did on Schenkerian Analysis Pt.2.
For the love of all that's holy. And definitely review that before coming here.
And really just review the whole podcast.
I'd really just review the whole podcast, yeah, because at this point, everything we've talked about has to come into play to understand what's going on here. This is the culmination of understanding classical music.
Yeah, from a different perspective, right?
From a different perspective, yeah. And really from the same perspective. Really, it ties in very well to everything we've always said and everything we've always asserted about tonal harmony, especially in classical music. Mm-hmm. It's just pointing it out by way of actual analysis of, sort of compositional decisions, I suppose.
Would you say this is from a broader perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
From a broader perspective and from a how do you tie it all together? Because we've talked a lot about, this chord serving that function and moving to this other chord and, this chord resolving this way and that. And this is so how do you take all of this stuff and start tying it together into actual pieces of music, actual musical phrases that last multiple measures, actual pieces of music, across multiple movements even, when you get deep enough into this stuff. Mm-hmm. So it all kind of comes together here.
Yeah.
Which is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. And I had a little bit of a hard time. I had some of my own cognitive dissonances, which we'll talk about when we get into the topic, right?
Yep.
But I'm starting to see the light. The light is creeping in, so don't worry, Matt. Matt is kind of a big proponent of this this system of analysis, right?
I'm a proponent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very fair. There are theorists. This is funny. There's an old theory joke, which I may be the only person who gets it, but there's an old theory joke that says narratology is an art and set theory is a science and Schenker is a religion. It is very often the controversy and the conflict and the polemics around Schenker in the music theory world are often are almost religious, right? It's like, the believers see it and believe it's there, and other people say there is nothing to this, it's funny, in the context of that, I am a proponent. I am not a proselytizer, if you don't see the value in Schenker, then, peace, go on your own way. I don't think this is the end all be all of understanding music necessarily, but I do think this is very important to point out that music does these kinds of things, whether you want to use Schenker's terminology or not.
Yeah, I think in those terms I would probably call myself an agnostic, but Schenker curious.
Schenker curious.
Well, we'll learn more about Schenker in just a second, but let's get.
I'm one of the Holy See. One of the, I'm not a priest or anything. I'm just one of those,
Would you call yourself a cardinal? No, you're not a priest. A deacon.
Not a priest.
You're a deacon.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe a deacon. Or maybe I'm just sitting in the pew, because I'm told I'm supposed to. I don't know. We'll see. I'm interested in what everybody else thinks. I don't know if we've got any feedback or not, but I want to hear other people's opinions on Schenker.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens when we get through this episode.
Absolutely, yes.
So let's go ahead and do our social section here.
Let's do that.
We have a new review from, we got 5 stars from Live Your Dreams 1.
Nice.
Short and simple.
Yes. You guys are wonderful. Really enjoying this podcast. And with 3 multicolored hearts.
Yes, they put some emojis in there, an orange, a red, and a pink one, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, or a yellow one.
Very nice. Thank you.
A little splash of color.
So glad you're enjoying it.
The people who want to support us but don't have a lot of disposable income for that kind of thing
Yeah,
can always leave a review and widen our presence.
absolutely. It helps.
Yeah, and it's probably making the world a better place because you're spreading the music knowledge.
Yeah, getting it to more ears. Mm-hmm. Beating the algorithm, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Creating more fine musicians.
Indeed.
One episode at a time.
That's the mission.
Now, if you do want to support us financially, just go to our website, musicstudent101.com, and click on the donate page.
Yes.
And you'll find there's a place where you can buy our merchandise. Mm-hmm. You can do a one-time PayPal donation.
Yes.
Or you can support us on a monthly, like a subscription donation, like our good Patreon patrons.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, we have a new one here to speak of.
We do. So, Anna Thomas out of Dorset, England.
Yeah.
And Anna says, firstly, thank you for these podcasts. They are fascinating and have introduced me to a whole new world. There's so much to know in music.
Isn't there?
Isn't there just? I just wanted to ask you for some advice. I learned piano in school many years ago, up to grade 6 in classical piano and theory. That's pretty far, actually. That's pretty good. Then we moved back to UK from Jamaica, and I struggled to continue. Then I went to university and stopped. I tried to go back to learning when my children were young, but I didn't get into it. I think it didn't excite me because it only taught me to play those particular pieces. Oh, how well do I know this lament? This is... I hear this all the time from people, and it's like, well, you just learned to play. We're actually discussing this pre-podcast a little bit, right? You only taught these particular songs, and
hot cross buns can only go so far.
Can only go so far. And at grade 6, she's a little beyond hot cross buns, but at the same time, you're only taught these pieces by rote, and it's difficult, when you don't have someone teaching you new stuff. She continues, now I'm semi-retired and studying fine art. I want to make installations, visual reality art, etc., and make music as part of this. I did that once.
Yeah.
In grad school. I did a bit in my last academic year when I did a foundation year. I've bought a synthesizer and I'm playing with GarageBand, but I also want to get back into piano. I want to be able to improvise and play along to songs, pick them out on the piano and play and have fun. And compose. Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how to go about this as I haven't played for so many years. My fingers are stiff, and the exercise books I've seen look so hard. Hanon, Czerny, ooh, yeah, those are serious.
You know those?
I've heard of them.
Yeah, okay.
Any advice on all of the above?
Well, I'm sure you've all heard us mention us not being piano players just about as often as we've mentioned being bass players.
It's a close second.
Yeah. But do you have any, I wrote back to her and had my own suggestions, but do you have any you'd like to share before I get into those?
I think my first piece of advice would be don't be too hard on yourself. Mm-hmm. This stuff is hard even when you do have a teacher, even when you're, if you're in college for music and have a environment around you, it's still hard, even in those circumstances. Mm-hmm. To be out doing it on your own is doubly, triply, quadruply hard.
Yeah.
So, first of all, give yourself a break. I know, when you start back after a while, like she says, your fingers are stiff. Mm-hmm. A lot of that stuff seems like it was a long time ago and you don't remember it. And exercise books are just that, exercises. They don't feel like music. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It makes you feel like you have so far of a way to go before you're actually where you want to be. So I think my first piece of advice is you're doing great. Just having the interest, just picking it up, just coming back to it takes a world of courage. Mm-hmm. And, that. So congratulations and hats off just for that. Don't feel like you have to be super proficient at it in a day or a week or a month. Do what you can when you can. Take it a little bit at a time. Like I alluded to, I see this all the time where people say, "Well, I just learned specific pieces, and now however many years later, it's hard. It's hard to compose. It's hard to improvise. You know, it's hard to just play and have fun. You know, this is where things like this podcast can come in. You know, sorry for the shameless plug, and you know, she's already a patron, so you know. But this is where things like this podcast, you know, learn basic theory, right? You know, and learn at your own pace. But you know, learn basic theory. So you learn how chords move from one thing to another, and then start, you know, just sort of sit down and play and play with it. You know, try playing out things that interest you. You know, from a chord progression standpoint, you know, or from a theory standpoint, you know, this is how you begin your life as a composer, right?
Since she's asking, yeah.
Yeah, don't feel like you've got to go from exercise books to pieces of music to composing your own pieces of music. That's one path. I think I would say, you know, first start by having fun. First start by enjoying it. First start by having fun. You know, make up your own stuff. You know, don't feel like you have to be Mozart, you know, the first time you sit down to compose something. You know, just write something that's within your grasp, you know, and you'll be amazed at how thrilling it is to be creating music yourself. You know? So that's the best advice I can give, is just keep doing the same things you're doing.
Cool.
Yeah.
When you are ready to start looking into some books, I did mention to her the one that we used in class piano at UAB. It was called Progressive Class Piano, A Practical Approach for the Adult Beginner by Elmer Harima.
Right.
And I remember they had, like, they would give melodies. They would start off very simple.
Yeah.
Simple melodies, and then they would take the same melody, put some chords to it, you know. And then they focus on fingering positions and scales and all that stuff, all the basics you need.
Yeah, it's probably a little more approachable than some of the other ones.
And also, I know that there are some finger exercises and stretches you can do. One I kind of like for bass, and it probably transitions over to other music, you know, instruments. But like, if you imagine holding your hand where you're putting your index finger and your ring finger down with the middle finger and the pinky finger up.
Yeah.
And then switch places where you have the other two down and the other two up. So you're alternating. Some people I can't even do that with my right hand. I can do it with my left hand.
For bass players, it's the left hand that this is going to be.
But also stretching for fingering too. I think it's just an all around good exercise. But that's just one I know of, you know.
Yeah.
But and also as you get older, I'm learning. We're all learning that you have to deal with arthritis and things like that. So there might be some supplements you can look into. Dr. Jeremy's not going to get into that because I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, there you go.
So thanks again, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much for your support.
We do appreciate that. And if anyone wants to support us on Patreon, go to patreon.com/musicstudent101 and you can learn the different tiers.
Yeah, we have 3 tiers of cool stuff.
One in which you get into the site and see the extra episodes. One in which you get a cool coffee mug, and one in which you get your own episode.
Your own episode where we answer your music question and specifically.
Post it on the Patreon site. So anyways, so that's Patreon, and then now we have a listener mail, which comes to us from Chandler Zimmerman out of Kingman, Arizona.
And Chandler says, I'm a custodian at a small-town high school in Arizona, and I improvise on piano on my breaks and during any free time. That's awesome.
Isn't it?
Any free time I may get during the day. I am constantly thinking about music and analyzing positively everything I listen to. I came across your podcast on Spotify a couple of weeks ago, wanting to review some theory knowledge. I went to school for music performance, but had to drop out during junior year /COVID and move back home. Oh, that's sad.
Common tale, I'm sure.
Yeah, I bet. Having a job where I get to pluck out melodies on an old out-of-tune backstage piano is amazing, and I love having so much time to get through your episodes and quickly apply whatever I was learning and record it. I usually play chords and single-voice melodies by ear, with varied harmonies like major, minor, thirds. Oh, how fun.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
We got somebody who thinks kind of like us here, Matt.
I know, right? I'm decently comfortable in all keys, but find C# minor to be the most comfortable key to play in on piano. Call me crazy, I know. If you're crazy, I'm crazy too, because I also find that key very, very comfortable for some...
Oh, that's weird. I misread that. I misread that and I wrote him back saying, "Oh, no kidding, C# minor's the worst." And I think I was thinking C# major.
Yeah.
So.
Well, now I can't play in it, but. Yeah,
C sharp minor is not that bad. It's
yeah,
all
C sharp minor is really not that bad. Yeah, it's pretty good. Anyway, when there's no music being read, it flows off the fingers really well, I promise. Mm-hmm. Your fingers. It doesn't flow off my fingers. Anyway, I was finding it hard to modulate keys, and when you guys said the 6 of the 1 chord was the 2 of the 5 chord and can be used for a 2-5-1 progression into the key of 5, it made something click about modulation that suddenly made it a lot simpler to move between keys and make chord progressions that have the color and sound that I've been looking for. Yes, that is called a common chord modulation.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yes, we did. Next up is minor to diminished to 5-7 to 1 progressions, and that's going to be really cool. Oh, yeah.
Love the enthusiasm.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I saw an episode on piano voicings, which would be really cool to hear about. I know piano isn't really a primary instrument for you, but I think y'all might have an effective and concise way of explaining it. You both are impressive educators. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys for providing such amazing content for the music community. Congratulations on everything up to this point. It's sincerely such a gift to be carrying a music lecture on the go. Keep up the outstanding work.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's so great to hear that we're having a positive benefit. Piano voicings. Yeah, I'm not a pianist.
No, we talked about that.
I could maybe give you 10 or 15 minutes. It would maybe make a good Patreon episode. I think with a little research. I'm just no expert whatsoever, so anything I gave would be very, very basic. So for the hobbyist pianists out there in the world. So, but we could always bring in a pianist and see what they have to say on the matter.
We talked about that, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Well, thanks again, Chandler, for writing in, and I think it's great to hear our listeners actually learning to compose pieces and actually being happy with what they do based on the knowledge they're gaining from this show,
Love it.
And that's a great one, too. What was it? The 2 of 5 is the 6 of 1.
Yeah, the 6 of 1 becoming the 2 of 5.
Yeah.
And then you end up in 5. That's a very classic one.
Yeah, it's a good
Another one is the 1 becoming the 4 in the key of 5. And that's another super classic one.
Yeah, and the subject field of this email, it was the power of mediance.
The power of mediance.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
I think that there's something really kind of romantic about this whole thing, almost like Phantom of the Opera. It's like you walk into this auditorium, this high school auditorium, you hear this haunting, out-of-tune piano.
Coming from somewhere.
From behind the curtains,
Yeah.
It's Chandler.
I would have loved to have heard that in my high school.
Yeah. People probably run away screaming. It's probably still good piano playing, but they probably think it's a ghost.
They probably
Phantom of the
They'd
auditorium.
run away screaming from my piano playing for sure.
But anyway,
we digress.
As we do.
Well,
thanks again, and let's go ahead and move on to the show, shall we?
Shall we indeed? So this is a fun one.
Uh-huh.
And as my students may well attest, when I say fun, people are often terrified.
Yeah. By fun, you mean horrifying.
Yeah, when I say this is going to be fun, they just go, oh, no.
They know you well, huh?
But I mean, I think this is fun. But then again, I am who I am. So this is our second episode on Schenkerian analysis. Mm-hmm. And as we said at the beginning, definitely listen to the first episode we did, Schenkerian Analysis Part 1, before you listen to this one. Because this stuff is complex enough as it is, without, being behind on the conversation. So
it is a sequence course.
Oh, definitely. Mm-hmm. As much as all of our courses are sequence courses. Yep. Because theory is just like that. It just builds on itself. Totally. This one is no different, and I would say even more vital. Because some of the fundamental ideas that we were talking about here have to be explained in the right way, I think, for you to not just go, what are they even talking about, right?
Yeah.
So definitely do that. But presuming you've done that, we left off with that one talking about...
Well, I do know that where we kind of left off, we were saying we were kind of recapping the basic idea of Schenker, right?
Right.
Which is, according to your words, that musical material is generated by counterpoint not just in the short term, not just in the short note-to-note term, but also across a piece of music as well. That's the most basic look at Schenkerian analysis.
That is definitely my preferred way to look at it. I think that is the way in which it is most useful for us today. Mm-hmm. You know, it is to sort of teach us how to look at a piece of music long term. Mm-hmm. In doing that, we learn to also look at pieces of music over large passages of time, because we learn that what is happening is species counterpoint is being stretched out and embellished and creating larger pieces of music in such in this way. And so we learn that, and then we learn how the tonic and dominant triads really do provide the basic structure of tonal music.
You know, I got another quote of yours, Matt, while we're on the topic of harmony and counterpoint.
I'm always terrified when you quote me.
I know, I love it.
I'm like, oh my God, what did that idiot say now? You know,
that genius said, where the harmony people stop is where the counterpoint people start. Should that be continue or what? What do you think?
Yeah, idiot. No, you got it backwards.
Oh, okay.
Where the counterpoint people stop is no. All right, no, forget it. Scratch that. No, yeah. Where the harmony people stop is with the idea of just chord. Mm-hmm. If you want to push your understanding of a piece of music beyond chord, you have to turn sideways and look at it horizontally and see the counterpoint. Mm-hmm. And then you discover it was that counterpoint that was informing those chord choices the whole time. Mm-hmm. At least in classical music. You know, popular music can be a little more carefree with these things. Mm-hmm. It can sort of treat the chord as an entity and not worry about counterpoint, but
self-standing.
Yeah, but classical music definitely is really an art of counterpoint.
And then we should also mention that when Schenker says these things, he's mainly referring to westernized tonal music.
100% referring only to Western tonal music. And really only Western tonal music of a particular era, you know, of a particular 200 to 300 year span tops.
And maybe even a little more towards the German persuasion.
Very much towards the German persuasion. And Chopin, who is an honorary German.
We have talked about that, too.
But yeah, very much towards the German persuasion. We talked a little about his personal ideological views and how he wasn't the world's greatest person. Mm-hmm. You know, this is not somebody you want to just be your best buddy were you alive at the time. However, you know, we're not really talking about who he was as a person. We're talking about his theories. Mm-hmm. Right, and we're talking about at this point, it is no longer even just his theory because it has been expounded upon by theorists who came after. So we're really talking about structural theory. Mm-hmm. And this is really just an introduction, Schenker, as to looking at music in terms of structural theory, mm-hmm. which I will go so far as to say almost all theorists do, whether they put any stock in Schenker himself or not. Mm-hmm. You know, even the people who are very anti-Schenkerian will put parentheses around a passing 6/4 chord and call it a passing 6/4 chord, mm-hmm. and seem unaware of the what I consider the hilarious irony that is a Schenkerian statement. When you say this 6/4 chord is passing, mm-hmm. you know, you are putting that 6/4 chord on a surface level, and the two chords it passes from and to on a deeper level, and that is Schenkerian thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
While you bash Schenker to the ground, right? It's funny. Theories can be amusing, yes, unintentionally so.
Let's as a little bit of review. Let's talk about what you're talking about here. Mm. We talked about we used "Ode to Joy" as an example.
We did,
and we were talking about how what's happening at the very beginning of "Ode to Joy" is dun 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 dun. That's 3, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I think even I can pull this off.
Yeah. So what Schenker would do was would be to take this melody and just really boil it down.
Yes.
And be like, when that 3 was moving to 5, it passed through the 4.
Right. So this melody is not just one note after another, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are in the key of D major. Okay. This is our D major triad, our tonic triad, right? And this melody has as its fundamental structure these 3 notes. It begins on the 3rd of that triad, which is something that Schenker has observed a lot of melodies sort of hang around on 3, right? Begin on 3, and sort of can come back to 3. 3 is a very important sort of starting point.
It's kind of where the flavor is of a chord, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. It can, like 3 can go down, so, you can sort of, right, yeah, or we can do like Beethoven, and 3 can go up. But some of the things we said back in that old episode is, as you were saying, we start at 3. We managed to reach up to 5, right? And then all the way back down to 1.
1, yeah.
1, yeah. And then back up to 3.
3.
And then that 3, when we reach our half cadence, moves to 2.
Yeah, it kind of suspends over to the 2, doesn't it?
Yeah. And this is our half cadence.
Yeah.
So what we had here was a melody that kind of started on 3, went up and down the major triad. And then when we return to that 3, now that 3 in a more tonally structural way, a kind of fundamental way, actually drops to 2. And this 2 bears something closer to the amount of significance that the scale degree 3 had, right? Because it creates this, it ends and we have this half cadence. Right? And we have this pause.
Yeah.
And then the rest of that melody is just doing that again, but with a PAC.
Perfect authentic cadence.
A perfect authentic cadence.
Where he's got a root position chord at the very end with the root in the melody?
Yes.
Okay.
So ultimately we have a melody that kind of went through 3 and then moved down to 2 before it moved back to 3 and then finally fell down to 1.
Yeah.
All within the tonic triad, right? The tonic triad was the impetus of this whole melody. Right? And this mi, re, do, very, very important figure in Schenkerian terms, because it turns out a lot of melodies do this in one way or another. Start on 3 and then move finally through a 5 chord, with a scale degree 2 in it, down to the tonic. And this is kind of how you feel at like kind of permanent rest.
Yeah.
Right? It is when you hit that. It's a very important thing in Schenker.
Also, did Beethoven harmonize these chords, or did he just stick around on 1 till he went to 5?
He harmonized these chords with a 5. So
1.
And that's 5. 1. 5.
To 1.
So yeah.
But Schenker, I don't think, would count all those as 5s, right? He would count those as kind of passing moments.
He would count those all as 5s, but he would count those 5s in between like that one.
Yeah.
As in themselves created by neighbor and passing motion, right? So in my harmony here, I have the scale degree 1 moving down to scale degree 7, and I have scale degree 3 moving down to scale degree 2, right? So, and then back. At the same time, this goes. know? And this just stays on the same note. So
Right.
it just right. So right. So he would think of those fives as being more surface level counterpoint, and a more structurally oriented five being the big one.
Right there. Yeah, on the
on the half cadence.
Yeah.
That
would count more. That would serve more of a 5 function.
would serve more of a 5 function. Would serve more of a structural function. Let's say they're all 5s. They're all dominant function in the way we've described them previously.
Okay.
But this one is more of a structural dominant. It's a good word to add to our vocabulary. Structural.
Yeah.
Right. And then of course, nothing that we've played so far would bear as much weight as that final 5 that pulls us to that one that constitutes our big rest.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the Odejori goes on beyond that, but so far, what we've got, that's the biggest structural thing that happens is moving back to that one.
And then on a similar note, this is one thing that I was having my cognitive dissonance with, right? Regarding notes being there and functioning and or not being there or whatever. We talked about the famous example of the 1-5-6-4 to 1-6 chord.
Yes.
And in this case, where I would say we had a 1-5-1, Schenker might say that this 1-6-4 chord is also a combination of passing tones.
Yes.
And thereby prolonging the 1 chord itself.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm getting it.
Yeah, so see if I can play that real quickly. I'm in C. 1 to passing 5-6-4, right?
5 chord in second inversion.
Yeah, in second inversion. To 1-6, right? Actually, make that 1-6. Yeah. So you're getting this really great bass line, right? Let's see if I can clean that up a little bit. Passing 5-6-4 to 1-6, right? Yeah. So there's a one on the one end of this progression. There's a one on the other end of this progression, and between those, we create this 5 chord by passing motion in the bass.
Yep.
Right. By neighbor motion in the tenor. Right, and
Stepping away from the note and stepping back to the note.
Right, yeah. By neighbor motion in the alto, or actually passing motion in the alto. Right.
3, 2, 1.
Yep. And by the soprano hanging out on that G, which is the 5 scale degree 5. So. Yeah. So.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. So that 5 chord was created of passing tones and neighbor tones and sustained notes.
Yeah.
So it is contrapuntally. Its purpose is contrapuntal, right? It is a passing 5-6-4 chord.
Same thing we talked about in harmony.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Schenker's only real observation is, look, that's a passing chord, right? These are melodic movements. These are melodic motions and melodic ideas. This 5-6-4 chord is serving a different role from, the root position 5 chord you're going to see at the end of a half cadence, and from the 5 chord that's going to be moved to 1 at a perfect authentic cadence. This particular 5 chord is, still technically dominant function, but dominant functioning on a surface level. It is performing a contrapuntal role, a surface level role of decorating this 1 chord, and as Schenker would call it, prolonging this 1 chord.
Yeah.
This 1 chord exists for a longer span of time because we went 1-5-6-4, 1-6.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So where we kind of left off on the last episode also, we touched on prolongation and function and horizontalization.
Horizontalization.
Now, Schenker would say that most melodies are the horizontalization of chords.
He would say all melodies are the horizontalization, of course. Schenker did not have this affliction that curses modern theorists, where we're always using words like usually, most, typically.
What do you call them? Disqualifiers?
Disqualifiers, yeah. Schenker was not about. He's like all. Mm-hmm. And he would say really controversial things too. And sometimes I think this is literally like mistranslation out of the German or something. But he would say things like modulation is an illusion. And when you study Schenker's like, I know what he means, but gosh, man, can you pick a different word? Because, it's like, they're not an illusion. It really happened.
Yeah. Don't tell me it didn't happen. I heard it happen.
It happened. You're not crazy because you thought it was in a different key. Use a different, you could really step on his own foot with words like that. Mm-hmm. But yes, he saw all chords as what we call a horizontalization, which is kind of what I demonstrated really with the Ode to Joy here. How it, sort of the tonic triad, informed the basic fundamental structure of this melody, while these other chords, the scale degree 4, for example, is a kind of passing tone. Mm-hmm. Right? And then, of course, the 3 down to 2, the half cadence, in the long term, also sort of functions as a passing tone, one that we would call an interrupted one, because it went from 3, right, down to 2.
Oh, okay. So instead of going straight from 3 to 2, it had other things going on between.
No. So that's the embellishment. So it's go 3, embellish, goes from 3 down to 2, and then its motion is down to 1, but it gets interrupted. It has to go back to 3. Do it again. Okay,
so in the first phrase, you have an interrupted situation.
So this ultimate goal of scale degree 2 is kind of passing in nature, right? Mm-hmm. But this passing nature is interrupted. So we create this lovely little parallel period, right, where it goes down to 2, it gets interrupted. It has to return to 3, and then on the second pass, manages to get all the way back down to 1. Mm-hmm. So still, ultimately, the fundamental melody here is 3. There's a great joke about Schenker basically thinking all music is just 3 blind mice.
Yeah,
which is an oversimplification, but not out of the realm of,
when you really look at all of his how much time and effort and depth he puts into explaining this, it really could be boiled down like that. Yeah. Or the whole thing about everything being a 1-5-1 progression.
Everything being a 1-5-1. And that's not to say that we should all just play, should all just go and go home, right?
Yeah.
Or even that we should all just go thank you, good night.
Yeah.
That's extraordinarily boring.
Yeah.
Right? That would be like living in a house that just had a foundation. No walls, no floors, you just built the concrete foundation. You built the concrete slab, and you're just like sleeping and trying to, on that, right? That's what that would be like.
Yeah.
No, right? But every house has a foundation.
Sure.
And what he's saying is that is the foundation.
Got it.
So we see that in the Beethoven. Mm-hmm. We had a Bach example, the Prelude Number 1 in the last episode, where we see these melodies as being sort of taking a vertical idea, the tonic triad, and sort of stretching them, twisting them horizontally and stretching them out. Mm-hmm. Right? These are all so far tonic triads. We can see this in things like Tchaikovsky too. Let's see if I can still play this. Right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of a popular Tchaikovsky melody, right? Mm-hmm. It's in B minor. And all just this melody is just all notes of the tonic triad. Mm-hmm. That's the scale degree 3, 1, 5, 3, 1. Right?
That's horizontalization at its
At its
simplest.
finest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other chords are often horizontalized too. The most often occurring horizontalizations are 1 or 5. Mm-hmm. Now you can also have 4 or 3. When those are horizontalized, it is usually in surface level detail. In what we call the middle ground, refer to previous episode of a Schenkerian analysis. Those horizontalizations are typically the 1 and 5. Mm-hmm. And in the background, it is the 1 always. In the ultimate, what he called the ersatz, the fundamentalist, most reductible, most reduced, can't reduce it any further structure of the.
The concrete slab.
The concrete slab is 1. The concrete slab is the tonic triad. There's your quote for next episode.
Yeah. Put some furniture and hang a few things. Put some furniture in there. No, I tell you, okay, put some electric and plumbing in there, and then you got the middle ground, right?
Yeah, you're right.
You just hang your pictures and
Yeah,
you put your...
put up some wallpaper, hang some pictures and stuff. Now you're talking about foreground.
That's what makes it your house.
That's what makes it your house and not somebody else's house.
Yeah.
Even if somebody else's house, all houses have a foundation, and many houses, if you live in a suburb or something, many of the houses that will even have the same floor plan, right? Or very, very similar ones.
Garden homes, yep.
Yeah, but nobody has your furniture, nobody has your paintings. At some point, it becomes your house, right? And that's what distinguishes, a ballade composed by Chopin from a piano sonata composed by Mozart, even if they can be said to have the same foundation.
Yeah. And if they do have your furniture, it's probably not a coincidence. They probably came in there and stole
They probably stole your furniture. Which composers will do.
Yes, they will. Oh, man, I love it. These analogies. Great, man.
Yeah.
Moving on, though.
Moving on. So in Schenkerian terms, melodies are comprised of a there's a word.
That's a hell of a word.
Of a horizontalization of a triad. That is then, generally speaking, or often, ornamented with neighbor notes and passing tones and, perhaps suspensions and the like, non-chord tones.
And we talked about the neighbor note would be a situation where you go from one note a step up or a step down and return to that note, right?
Right.
Passing tone would be when you pass from one chord member to another chord member through a non-chord tone.
Right, yeah. And when we're using this language that we're all familiar with by now of like things like chord tone, remember what we're talking about is now a structural chord tone, scale degrees 1, 3, and 5 being the tonic triad, right? So that passing tone can in itself have embellishments around it, and those embellishments can be embellished by chords. We saw this last time. But those chords are, and those will have passing tones around those, right? They'll have so you're talking about a passing tone of a passing tone at this point, right? We saw that, right? This kind of concept necessitates the striation onto a level, right? So you've got scale degree 1, scale degree 2, scale degree 3. On some level, scale degree 2 on a middle ground level, perhaps a background level, depending. Scale degree 2 is got all these embellishments on it, but it's got passing tones of passing tones coming off it. It itself on that middle ground level is a passing tone. It's just not going to pass immediately, right? First, we're going to go through all of this embellishment, and it's going to have a passing tone of a passing tone, right? And on that level, you've got passing tones and chord tones and non-chord tones, depending on what's being harmonized how, right? But then ultimately, that original passing tone of scale degree 2 is going to move down to scale degree 1. Passing tone on a fundamental level.
Yeah.
This is what I mean when I say that Schenker teaches us to look at big picture stuff, right? And what's going on across an entire musical phrase or even an entire piece of music.
I call it zooming out,
Zooming out, yeah.
In the scope of the piece, but also in the actual nature of the structure of music, like...
Yeah, and in your own brain.
In your own brain, yeah.
Just zooming out in your own brain and looking at things, big picture level.
In general, is not a bad idea, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, cool. Now, and then, of course, we talked about these chords being prolonged, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can then think of this as prolonging a tonic triad, when I go... This is all prolonging that tonic triad, right? If I'm just to make up a melody here. All prolonging the tonic triad, right?
Even that half cadence moment.
Even that half cadence moment ultimately is prolonging the tonic triad because, as we said, 3 to 2 passing, interrupted by 3 back, right? If I'm then to go on and go, prolonging the 5, right? Back to 1, prolong the 1 again. So I just prolonged 1 5 1. It's always 1 5 1 is the basis of everything.
Yeah.
And I want praise for composing that melody just off the top of my head like that.
Well done again, Matt.
I mean, people don't appreciate me. People don't appreciate my genius. That was right off the top of my head. I'm telling you. Okay. So in this way, these chords are prolonged, stretched out horizontally over time.
Yeah.
Rather than just, right?
Yeah, totally.
So.
And that is prolongation, right?
That is horizontalization.
That is, are they both two, do they both kind of feed into each other? I mean, is prolongation is a method of horizontalization or vice versa?
Vice versa. Horizontalization is a method of prolongation.
Got it, okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about prolongation.
Okay.
Let's talk about prolongation and function. So the chord that is horizontalized is generally responsible for the function of that passage in the way we've come to look at it. Right? Remember, we've talked a lot about function, about, a passage of tonic function, subdominant function, predominant function actually is what we called it. Some people call it subdominant. Predominant function, dominant function, right? So it is off, and we've talked about this before, right?
Would it be that the subdominant is specifically the 4 chord, where predominant can be a 4, 2, or 6, right?
That's exactly correct.
Okay, cool.
So horizontalization is one way to prolong a chord. So we've said this word several times now, prolongation. Let's talk about prolongation a little bit.
Yeah.
All right? And what prolongation can mean. So prolongation is generally responsible for function. So for what I mean is, we've talked about function before, where, the passage of music will have a tonic function, or a chord will have a tonic function, or a predominant function, or a dominant function.
Yeah.
There was one episode in particular where we talked about that function stretching out over a few measures, over a phrase even, of music, right? So it is generally the chord that is being horizontalized.
That was before our Schenkerian discussion.
That was before our Schenkerian discussion. So, destruction. That was before our Schenkerian discussion. Now with all the Schenker terms in our heads, we can look at that phenomenon more clearly and say that, well, the function kind of comes from the chord that is being horizontalized. Right?
So we're switching lenses.
Yeah. So, generally, that is the chord responsible for the function of that passage of music. Take, for example, this lovely little ditty from Mozart, his K545.
Oh, I have that handy. Let's listen to it.
Yay.
Oh, that sounded like an interruption.
It did.
Was that what that was?
Having not analyzed this piece Schenkerianly thus that far, I don't want to make any categorical statements, but it certainly sounded like it could be one.
Cool.
And I would feel fairly confident that it was because that sounded like either the repeat of the phrase, like this is maybe binary form, like a rounded binary, and phrase A is repeated. But it also sounded like it was a half cadence, right? So that might be, he may have gone on to be a parallel period. Mozart did fun stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounded like some kind of interruption to be sure. So when we look at this melody, we see that in this passage it is the one chord primarily that is being horizontalized / prolonged, right? Because we have right. So I've just got my tonic triad here. We're in G. And I've got starting on scale degree 3 again. Look at that.
How about that?
Yeah. And then that's scale degree 5. So, right?
Very tonic triad-y.
Very tonic triad-y. And then even going further, right.
Was that going to the 4 or was that staying in 1?
That well, we'll talk about it.
Okay. Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
But definitely, this melody, this is scale degree 1, right? This is up an octave, and then just kind of falling back down to 5. Some passing notes, a neighbor note right there at the end, right? And then this jump down figure again. Right. So it is. Before we look at the harmony, looking just at the melody for right now, we will address that for.
Okay.
Looking just at the melody right now, this looks like a horizontalization of the tonic triad, right? Very typical. It's usually either 1 or 5, being horizontalized. Good grief. And so therefore, this falls within our normal thinking. Note, however, and we've discussed this already too, but in the bass in measure 1, there's this very brief 5/4/3 chord because what we're doing here is going Alberti bass, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And then you go so this is a 5/7 chord, or sorry. Yeah, the implication, at least, of a 7 chord in a 5/7 chord in second inversion.
Yeah. Okay. So this is like this is in 3/4, and it's separate. Each measure is separated by 4/16 note.
Right. Yeah.
What do you call them?
3/16 note sort of
things, and this is the last one. So this only had 4/16 notes, right?
Yeah. My bad.
And this happens on the last of those. So it only happens during a third of the measure.
Right, yeah. So this is, it's on beat 3, right?
Beat 3, yeah.
So beat 1, 2, 3, and then right back.
Okay.
So we can see how this is continuing to prolong a 1 chord even through this 5/4/3 chord, right? Because how did this 5/4/3 chord came about? It came about by neighbor note motion from the G, the bass note, up to A.
I see it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And by the B, the third of that triad in the bass, that B, by neighbor note motion up to C. And then they both go back down. So 1, 2. If I'm just playing the beats, not the 16th notes.
Yeah.
Just playing the notes in the bass. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Pure neighbor note.
Yeah.
Right? And also in the tenor voice. Just playing the beats, not the 16th notes. 1, 2, 3, 1. Right? And so we're just taking this, and then if I put all that together, 2, 3, 1. And that's with the alto voice too, hanging out on that D. So, what Mozart has done here is just do a little neighbor note motion. Right?
Yeah.
He just stretched it out into an Alberti bass.
Alberti bass, which we are kind of bouncing.
Is that ba da 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 da?
1 5 3 5
Yeah,
1 5 3 5. Yeah.
It's called Alberti bass.
McCartney does that, and I love it every time. I do it a lot too.
I honestly don't know where the name comes from. I don't know if there was like some composer named Alberti that liked to do it, or some theorist. I got no idea.
Yeah,
but it's called the Alberti bass. So we can see then that while in that very, very, very brief beat 3, we had something that on a surface level was a dominant function, right?
Yes.
But more structurally, we are still prolonging 1. That all that was neighbor notes, right? So we continue to prolong 1 through all of that. Right? 1.
Yeah.
I'm not pianist enough to do the Alberti bass.
That's all right.
I was about as good as it's going to get from me.
Pretty close.
So overall, it's still a prolongation of 1. You mentioned the 4 chord in measure 3, right? So when we get to this part, this Alberti bass has been going on. And 1 and then we go to a 4 chord.
Yeah, that felt 4-y for me, for sure. And then a 5-7 kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second too. But so that 4-7 can be thought of as comprised as neighbor notes, right? Notice that the tenor voice in this chord is moving up to E, while that's the alto voice. This alto voice is moving from D up to E, while the tenor voice moves from B up to C, right? So we are still, and eventually they will move back to scale degrees 3 and 5. So this is still neighbor note motion. So we can still be thought of as prolonging the tonic triad.
Okay.
Now, you did mention there was a great little point in here in beat 3 of measure 3, where we have this freaky 7 of 5, right? But then it just moves back to
1.
1.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to 5. It goes to 1. This is a great example of the kind of problem things that Schenker can really sort of help us explain, right? Because this 7 of 5, Mozart, right? I tried to see if I could make this harmony make sense, right? This is G, C sharp, A sharp. That's because A sharp make it make sense.
A sharp 7.
Yeah.
Major minor 7.
No, alas, A sharp does not make it make any more sense. No, so A sharp. So I try to make this make sense. A sharp, C, fully diminished 7. What we really need is F sharp, and we're just not getting it. So this weird little 7 of 5, which you would expect to resolve,
Yeah.
right, like that, it's just going straight back to 1. So this might make no sense if you're struggling to understand how a 7 of 5 can go to 1.
If you're in advanced theory if you're in an exam and you're trying to really analyze this piece.
Yeah. Well, if you're in advanced theory on an exam trying to analyze this piece, you better be careful with the explanation I'm about to give you. Ask your professor if he's a Schenkerian.
Okay.
But changing tones, chromatic changing tones. Both of those notes, A sharp and C sharp, are a half step below B and D, right? So we're getting around D and around B. So we continue to prolong 1. And whereas I could not come up with a good, I mean, I'm a good theorist. I could hem-haw around, right? It's like, well, there's an implied F sharp, and there actually is a implied F sharp in the melody, which makes it
More plausible.
fully diminished 7, right?
Yeah.
Or half diminished 7. So half diminished 7/4/2 or something. You know, analyzing just that tritone, you know, we still see how this can come out Schenkerianly as to continuing to prolong 1. Not, you know, even though that 7 chord might have a predominant function in front of the fact, you know, ultimately we are still prolonging 1 through all 4 of these first measures.
Especially in the case of predominance that don't go to the dominant.
Right, yeah. So let me think. F sharp, A, F sharp, okay, F sharp, G. Gosh, that just does not work. That G has, so yeah, I'm a good theorist. I can say, okay, G is a pedal tone. There is an F sharp in the melody, right? So I can scrunch my way around and make this 7 of 1. You know, it would end up being what, 7/6/5 with a G non-chord tone, pedal tone. You know.
Yeah.
But to me, I think this is a little more elegant. Chromatic, you know, up, down, back to the original.
All of a sudden, Schenker seems a little more simple than some of the other stuff we've been using.
This is just changing tones. We talked about changing tones in our episodes on counterpoint, way back there, right? This counterpoint stuff is still present, is the idea.
Yeah.
Right? And for that matter, so are the 4 voices of tonal music, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, right? It is a mistake that theory students get well and early driven out of to think of this as one voice, right? This is 3 voices.
Yeah,
Soprano, tenor, and alto. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So there you go. Prolongation and function.
And basically what we're arriving at is that this 5 chord created by the neighbor motion and inner voices or passing motion or whatever does not create a dominant function.
It is very harsh to say it does not create dominant function because, and this is where some of your cognitive
These are your words, Matt. I'm reading them right off the page.
I know. Like I said, don't read anything that idiot says ever again.
I underlined them. I've underlined all the questions I'm going to ask you in this one.
Yeah. It is perhaps a bit harsh of me to say it does not. On a middle ground level, yes, it is not creating a dominant function.
Yeah.
On the very, very surface level of that beat, on the very, very tiny, zoomed all the way in level of that beat, you might call that dominant function. Depending on who you ask, honestly. These are questions of music theory aesthetics.
Yeah.
Really.
These are great arguments are caused.
But to zoom out even a little bit, and this whole measures 1 through 4 are tonic prolongation.
Got it.
Yeah. And then starting at measure 5, we have dominant prolongation. It looks like just looking at it. Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, when we have this beautiful little, that's all dominant function, right? Over this same lovely little, although you notice it's still a 6/4 chord, it's still a 5/6/4 chord. Sorry. We can talk about register transfer as a Schenkerian idea sometime later.
Okay.
Yeah, taking this and just moving that last G up an octave.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. Register transfer, right? But measure 5, horizontalizing out the 5/7 chord. So this measure has dominant function, right? And notice the genius of Mozart, though. Notice how he took this 5 chord, which in measure 1, beat 3, we called insignificant.
Yeah.
You know. And now in measure 5, it has more significance. I wonder if later down in the piece it would have more significance still. This seemingly insignificant 5/4/2 chord from beat 3 of the first measure.
It's growing in size and significance as we go, huh?
Then this is the genius of Mozart. We call this organicism in music. The things that are very tiny kernels are also represented as branches and maybe the trunk of the whole tree and things, right?
Yeah.
This idea of the ideas carrying conceptual weight from the very, very tiny kernel, surface level stuff to the more expanded middle ground stuff, and even into the deeper middle ground, bigger picture stuff. Something Beethoven did too. This was certainly Schenker's assertion that a lot of these composers' genius came from their ability to do this very thing, to have thematic unity across foreground, middle ground. Backgrounds are always the same. But across foreground, middle ground, and even into the deep middle ground have sort of thematic conceptual unity. It's part of the genius of Mozart, if you ask me.
We decided that you can have as many middle grounds
as you need.
But it's typically there is just one ersatz
There is one and only one ersatz,
which is the foundation.
Which is the fundamental structure, and that is ultimately the tonic triad. Ultimately, this measure of dominant function is in service. It's neighbor note motion too, right? I mean, Mozart demonstrated that for us very brilliantly. In fact, it's like, look, this chord that is now dominant function. I only played it for a beat later, and you thought of it as surface level only, right?
Yeah.
He's demonstrating that it's all neighbor note motion and passing tone motion, and it's all ultimately in service of the tonic triad, which is what the ersatz is.
But in measure 5, now we're actually saying that this is a dominant function, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the last beat of measure 1, the third beat of measure 1, is it because it only happened for that small amount of time that we're just kind of writing it off as a passing moment, Because you would think that if Schenker was the one to zoom out, you wouldn't even take time into consideration or the amount of time you spend on given notes.
So Schenker didn't put a whole lot of consideration into time.
Yeah.
As a Schenker proponent, remember, I'm not a priest. As a Schenker proponent, I tend to be, me personally, it's hard to get away from a time element. The fact that something lasted for a measure means it bore a certain amount of impact on my perception. Whereas something that lasted for a beat, I'm not going to say it had less impact, but it had different impact on my perception than something that lasted a measure.
Carries more weight.
Yeah. And something that lasted 4 measures certainly has more of an impact, right?
You spend more time with it, you get to know it better, you get a feel of it.
Yeah. So I think if I was to make a Schenker graph of this, right, and we'll talk about the notation sometime way down the road, but if I was to make a graph of this, I would put that first measure 1, beat 3 in little black dots with no stems, meaning they are surface level stuff, very, very absolute surface level stuff. And the measure 5 might get stems.
And we'll get
meaning
into
they're just a level up.
We'll get into that notation later on, right?
Yeah, it's just a step up. Or I might not. Or I might decide that that's just neighbor note motion. But it is horizontalized, so I kind of have to. By the fact that it wasn't just a chord that then went somewhere else. It also kind of came down to the 5/4/2 in measure 5, and then did stuff. Arpeggia. That's doing stuff, right? But by nature of the fact that it had to do stuff, man, it has to get bumped up a level to explain the stuff it did.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's a great Schenker way to describe it without having to go back to how long it lasted, which Schenker would get all about. But like I said, I have a tendency to look at time as significant. Me personally.
Me too.
Yeah. So yeah. So there's that. Right? So when we talk about dominant function, as opposed to tonic function, we talk about prolonging the dominant triad. Dominants contain scale degrees 2 and 7, right?
Yeah.
And therefore have a very strong impetus towards resolving to tonic. Sometimes this strong impetus is interrupted. And we have talked about that, right?
Yep.
The Beethoven.
Yeah, the half cadence moment.
Yeah. This is interrupted, and we are left hanging. And when we're left hanging like that, it is an example of the pull, the counterpoint pull, right? We want to go back to 1. the function pull being, we want to go back to 1, being suspended. But it will eventually go back there, right? We're being suspended, and this creates musical tension that we delight in, right?
Sure.
We don't know what's going to happen. We're all on the edge of our seat. This is like drama in theater or in movies or something.
We thirst for that drama.
Yeah, we know the hero's going to win. We know Luke Skywalker's going to win, right? We know the Avengers are going to pull it out. We don't know how. It's kind of that same kind of tension, right?
Yeah. What monkey wrench will be thrown in last minute to?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So often this is interrupted and we're left hanging like this. This has important implications to our counterpoint. It means that a resolution set up in one measure doesn't have to be resolved necessarily in the very next measure, or the measure after that, or the measure after that. It might get resolved at the end of the phrase. It might not get resolved to the end of the next phrase. Depending on what you're thinking about, it may not get resolved to the end of the movement or the end of the symphony.
Oh my goodness!
And as a young, cavalier. Immature grad student, I often wondered if there was any composer out of there that ever had a Schenker progression that just lasted his whole career through multiple pieces of music.
Oh gosh!
Or something. I even once thought maybe I would do that.
Yeah.
I didn't. I didn't. Nobody panic that such a horrible thing does not exist.
You still have plenty of years to keep for your composition career.
We'll see.
At least another 30, I'm sure.
Yeah, but this is sort of the way that Schenker stretches your mind, because now you're thinking of an end goal, right?
Yeah.
And this thinking of end goal, this thinking of something that is resolved not immediately or even a little bit later than immediately, but resolved sometime later, right? Is fundamental to this kind of, not even, I'm going to say fundamental to structural analysis, because this goes even beyond Schenker, and the way we have adopted this way of thinking to apply to other theories, not just Western classical music, but jazz and pop music and stuff like this. This idea of this end goal is necessary, right? And really stretches your brain out.
Sure.
While we're talking about dominants are also expanded by cadential motion, and after the fact additions of sevenths, or by passing chords and neighbor chords. So we've observed some dominant chords that were in themselves neighbor chords.
Yeah.
But you can go to that dominant chord that was in itself a neighbor chord or a passing chord, and then have that horizontalized out, prolonged out itself, right? And that sort of pushes it up a level in significance. Whenever something gets prolonged in any way, it gets pushed up a level in significance.
I see.
But then that can also happen. And then that chord will eventually do what it was supposed to and resolve where it was supposed to. After all the horizontalizing out, after the prolongation, after the, moving around, as it were.
And when you say expanded by cadential motion, can you elaborate? Or is it just like we're talking about like the 165?
Yeah, we're basically talking about the 164, right? So it can be prolonged by what we have defined before as two simultaneous suspensions, right? So now we understand what that is a little better, right? This is still dominant function, even though it's 164, because those notes, those 6/4 are suspensions and are about to resolve to 5/3 over that root. Right? So this is a way of prolonging a dominant functioning chord.
And it's like, where does the 164, where does the 1 chord begin and the 5 chord, begin? Or where does the 1 chord end and the 5 chord begin?
A good Schenkerian will tell you that was always 5. Do not write it as 164. That's why theorists now will say, don't write it as 164. And everyone's like, why not? It's a 164. And this is why.
And you would say, Schenker would say, no, this was a dominant that was expanded by cadential motion.
Yes. You can also expand them by throwing in random sevenths. This dominant triad, we'll make it a dominant 7.
We do that plenty.
We do that all the time.
Plenty. Yeah. I do that
halfway through the measure, it becomes a 7. Yeah.
Yeah, just to make it more interesting. Just
absolutely.
To add more drama, to add more tendency tones.
Yeah. So we haven't talked about predominant function.
Okay. Looking forward to this.
Chords, you should be. This is fascinating. Chords of predominant function, whether prolonged or not, serve as a connection between the prolonged 1 chords and the ultimate 5 chords that will resolve to 1 in a perfect authentic cadence. So what I mean by that, I will set this up very simply. I'll be in D. I'll try to be a good pianist for once today. And I will go to 2-6, right? And then I will go to 5, and then I'll go back to D1. And notice my good Schenkerian melody.
Oh yeah, right down the.
Right down from 3 down to 1, right? Passing tone harmonized over 2 different chords.
Yeah,
right.
Which is kind of bold.
Hey, I'm a rebel
in
over
my
here.
humble opinion.
This 2-6 chord that I created. This one connects this chord to this chord, right? The 5 chord.
Yeah.
So 1 and 2-6, 5, 1. As that, I don't have to for this to be true, I don't have to prolong that 2 chord, right? I don't have to. I can. I can prolong it if I want to. I just didn't.
Nice. Yeah.
But they serve as that connection, right? They serve contrapuntally. They're like the lower neighbor that scooped up to that 5, right? That's why 2-6 is so popular, is because it has scale degree 4, right? Most common bass line ever.
Oh yeah, 1-4-5-1.
Turns out most structurally common bass line ever.
The most structurally sound, huh?
Most structurally sound bass line ever.
Probably why it's so common.
Yeah. So we've described the ersatz as the tonic triad, and the role of the bass in that ersatz is to go 1, 5, 1.
Yeah.
Right. But it is very common to embellish that 5 with 1, 4, 5, 1. Right. Whether you embellish that. Whether you harmonize that scale degree 4 as a 4 chord or a 2-6 chord or a 2-6-5 or a Neapolitan 6 or a whatever, right? It is very common, or sharp 4, right? I mean, if it's a 5-6-5 or whatever, right?
Huh.
That is that is very common. So very common, in fact. That it deserves special attention.
It deserves its own labeling, right?
It deserves its own labeling, and it gets its own labeling. It is not, strictly speaking, a prolongation of the 1 chord. We can't, squeeze that square peg into that round hole.
Now, wait a minute. Hold on, because I think I can.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah, I got all the theories. No, what's happening is basically the same thing we were talking about earlier. You got 4 voices, all in the 1 chord is all 4 voices.
Yes.
And can't you just say that all the movement that happened in the 2-6 or the 4 chord or whatever you want to call it is the same effect? It's either passing tones or neighbor tones going and ending on the 5 chord?
You can say that about all motion through chords.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it becomes, however, kind of hard because it doesn't go back to 1. It kind of becomes hard. It's like, well, if this is a prolongation of 1, then where's the 1 when it goes back? Why is the 1 lost at this chord?
Yeah.
So it becomes hard. You can say that. You absolutely can say that, and you can say that this too is ultimately you can say that everything is ultimately a prolongation of 1, depending on the surf, But number one, it gets hard for you to justify that just in practice. Just in when you actually start looking at the music, you start having to go through some gymnastics to justify that.
Yeah.
For these predominant functioning chords like 2-6 or Neapolitan 6 or whatever. Also, even if you do say that, it's still this particular motion happens so often in practically every piece of music, really. that it still nonetheless deserves a kind of special attention. So, while it's not really a very straightforward, clear-cut prolongation of 1, it serves as this lead-in to 5. So we consider this predominant chorus to be a part of the underlying harmonic structure, worthy of their own function, as it were.
Yeah, because when we were talking about harmony, tonal harmony, we kind of gave all 7 chords of the scale its own function, right? There was a tonic.
And then 2 was predominant.
2 predominant.
Yeah, and the median sort of serving as a substitute of tonic.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
and 4 being predominant 4 chord, generally speaking, yeah.
And there was supertonic, subtonic, and all that stuff. But now we're going to say all those other things could either fall into the category of tonic, predominant, or dominant.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is one way, another way that Schenker is kind of zooming out.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say, this is one of the ways in which we are zooming out.
Okay.
And discovering predominant function.
Carry on.
Yeah. Okay. So if we consider the fundamental baseline, the Schenker had some big German word for the Bassbretzung or something like that.
Nice.
People today just call it the fundamental bass. If we consider the fundamental bass, if we look at the absolute most structural of the structural notes of the bass of a piece of music, and it goes 1, 5, 1 very next step up from that, 1 maybe really half step up from that will be 4, 5, 1. Right? So it's worthy of its own sort of special little place in our structural look, and worthy of its own quote-unquote function. So, we think of it as predominant function. Even though, as you rightly pointed out, this is just neighbor notes and passing tones like everything else. It's just, it happens so much and still has that, as strong a pull to the 5 as 5 does to the 1, right? As we've talked about since time immemorial. That we look at it and recognize its unique role. Chords that can do this, we've already talked about a lot of them. 4, 2 in whatever inversion, 6, in whatever inversion, and any other predominant chords such as Neapolitan 6, augmented 6. Although note that in that big picture, predominant will usually turn out to be diatonic. So the augmented 6 chords are chromatic, right? So they will probably lead to something diatonic.
I see.
Because diatonics tend to be deeper into the foreground, deeper into the structure than chromatics, which tend to be surface.
Got it. And now, and the same thing with the Neapolitan 6 chord, right?
Yeah, tend to be, chromatics tend to be more surface level.
And it's fun how the 6 can sometimes be functioning as tonic, but also functioning as predominant.
Yes.
Isn't that fun?
Yes.
Good old 6.
6
Hey, where
is
does 3
awesome.
fit into this?
Huh?
Where does 3? So 3, we're kind of still calling 1 a little bit, right?
Yeah, we're still kind of calling it 1, and 3 kind of serves to be a function, a prolongation of the tonic triad. It doesn't really happen very much in the music that Schenker pointed to as the stuff that fit his theory best, the 3 chord. You just don't see it a whole lot. When you do see it, it is a horizontalization of a fairly middle ground to surface ground area. It's usually a harmonization of scale degree 3, right? Which is itself part of the tonic triad. So what you've done is on a surface level prolonged scale degree 3, by using the 3 chord, and that's going to go on, to something like 6 where you're prolonging. Probably like the 4 or so, I don't know. I'd have to look at actual examples. But 3 is sort of thought, when it happens, it kind of tends to happen that way. 3 is giving much more attention in late Romantic music when Riemann started noticing his mediant relationships. The fact that there's only one note difference between the 1 chord and the 3 chord. Yeah. They tend to give more attention to the 3 chord than Schenker does, who sees a 3 chord and wants to hammer it into his theory.
I see.
which he's bad about.
Cool.
Yeah, Schenker and Schoenberg hated each other, by the way. That may be a digression. Oh, we talked about that already? Good.
Or no, maybe it was somebody else. Who was the other one? I think it sounds like Schenker was hard to get along with.
He definitely had his own ideas, and they were very, very original ideas that deserved attention. But when you're that set on your own ideas, people who've never had those ideas before it can, it can be a tough sell, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. So, how do we feel about Schenker in this day and age, Jeremy?
I feel better than part 1.
Good. Yeah. I'm glad of that. I'm glad of that. It takes a little sitting with this stuff. It really does.
Moving towards a state of being convinced.
Of convinced, or at least like me, a proponent.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll never join the priesthood, but that's okay.
Yeah. Do you think this is a good place to stop?
I think this is a good place to stop because as we move forward, we'll start talking about melodic prolongation, the linear intervallic progression.
Yeah.
And I think we've covered enough for one episode at this point.
That'll be some fun stuff.
Yes.
Get into the prog, the 3 prog, and the
3
5 prog.
the 5 prog, the 8 prog, absolutely.
Schenker brings new terminology, and Schenker brings new notation.
Yeah.
And new philosophy.
All designed to just stretch your brain and not even have new ideas or new notions of what tonal harmony is. Just have broader versions of your old ideas. It's really what Schenker is.
I like it.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, this is some pretty viscous stuff, right?
But it is. So it makes a recap hard.
It does, but can you possibly take a stab?
So what we talked about in general was horizontalization.
Yeah.
Which is taking a chord and stretching it out over a few measures and of melody, sort of twisting it horizontally and making a melody out of it, and sprinkling it with passing notes and neighbor notes. But that chord is the underpinning of our melody. Look, there's a couple of examples of that. We talked about how the horizontalizing of a chord is generally something applied to the 1 chord and the 5 chord. Right? We talked about how even when some of these neighbor notes and what have you of a horizontalized melody are harmonized, those harmonizations will themselves come from neighbor notes and passing notes. So it will not disturb the integrity of the idea of horizontalizing out a 1 chord, for example, or a 5 chord.
It's almost like a fractal kind of thing.
Yes. Horizontalization is a type of prolongation. And we will talk about other types of prolongation in part 3. But it is also responsible for the function of a passage of music, be that function tonic function, dominant function, or predominant function. Dominants containing scale degrees 2 and 7 have a very strong pull towards the tonic. Sometimes this pull is interrupted, as in with the case of a half cadence, and then we have to come back and kind of start over and get to the tonic later.
Yeah.
Which is a very fun concept. It sort of stretches your mind and makes you think of things like passing motion in a broader sense, which is one of the big advantages of Schenkerism. And then we also talked a little about predominant function and how this really, it happens so much that it pulls to the 5 with the same strength that the 5 pulls to the 1, and that, how it can be hard to classify this as prolongation of 1 or 5, and so we assign it a very special place. It actually exists very, very deep into our structure as a lead-in to 5. And that's basically what we got through.
Very nice.
Hey, that's the Schenker reduction of what we got through.
That's what it took us about 80 minutes to say, huh? I love it. Hey, and I know this was the recap, but let me just throw in one more last question for you.
Absolutely.
Because we really focused mainly on passing tones and neighbor tones. Would Schenker take any account for suspensions, anticipations, appoggiaturas, other non-chord tones? Do those factor into
Those
this?
kind of non-chord tones are more rhythmically motivated than passing a neighbor.
I see.
And Schenker didn't have much to say about rhythm.
Okay.
He would take them into account, but he would usually just sort of swipe over them and then it goes to the note it's supposed to, right? The fact that, a 4 moved down to 3, not exactly on the downbeat, but an 8th note later, was kind of little consequence to Schenker. And, because it's kind of little consequence to counterpoint. Now, again, a lot of expounding upon these ideas have happened by later theorists. I, for one, also have a tendency to think of those as important, but because they're eventually going to do what they're supposed to do, they are kind of rhythmically important. Whereas neighbor notes and passing tones are contrapuntally important, right? They represent second species counterpoint. They're both in seconds. They represent second species counterpoint, right, as a fundamental idea.
Refresh my memory. Did the other non-chord tones make their way into the discussion of counterpoint?
Suspensions are fourth species.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, he didn't consider them very much, but I consider them very much.
All right.
Yeah.
Two different theorists, two different perspectives.
Yeah. I'm a rebel over here. All right. So that's enough Schenker for one day. My brain hurts.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I gotta go home and take a nap now.
Yeah, right. Let's all go take a nap.
Let's
y'all.
all go take a nap now. We will see you next time.
Give those theory brains a pat on the back. And stay with us for more on Schenkerian analysis in future episodes. If you want to support us financially, check out the donate page on our website, musicstudent101.com. Or you can check out our merchandise at redbubble.com/musicstudent101. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on social media. And for questions or comments, you can write us at info@musicstudent101.com.